23. The migrant people, scuttling for work, scrabbling to live, looked always for pleasure, dug for pleasure, manufactured pleasure, and they were hungry for amusement. Sometimes amusement lay in speech, and they climbed up their lives with jokes. And it came about in the camps along the roads, on the ditch banks beside the streams, under the sycamores, that the storyteller grew into being, so that the people gathered in the low firelight to hear the gifted ones. And they listened while the tales were told, and their participation made the stories great. I was a recruit against Geronimo, and the people listened, and their quiet eyes reflected the dying fire. Them Injuns was cute, slick as snakes, and quiet when they wanted. Could go through dry leaves, and make no rustle. Try to do that sometimes. And the people listened and remembered the crash of dry leaves under their feet. Come the change of season and the clouds up. Wrong time. Ever hear of the army doing anything right? Give the army 10 chances, and they'll stumble along. Took 3 regiments to kill 100 braves, always. And the people listened, and their faces were quiet with listening. The storytellers, gathering attention into their tales, spoke in great rhythms, spoke in great words because the tales were great, and the listeners became great through them. They was a brave on a ridge, against the sun. Knowed he stood out. Spread his arms and stood. Naked as morning, and against the sun. Maybe he was crazy. I don't know. Stood there, arms spread out, like a cross he looked. 400 yards. And the men, well, they raised their sights and they felt the wind with their fingers, and then they do lay there and cooled and shoot. Maybe that Injun knowed somethin'. Knowed we cooled and shoot. Just laid there with the rifles cocked, and didn't even put 'em to our shoulders. Lookin' at him. Headband, 1 feather. Could see it, naked as the sun. Long time we laid there and looked, and he never moved. And then the captain got mad. Shoot, you crazy bastards, shoot. He yells. And we do laid there. I'll give you to a 5 count, and then mark you down, the captain says. Well sir, we put up our rifles slow, and never man hoped somebody'd shoot first. I ain't never been so sad in my life. And I laid my sights on his belly, 'cause you can't stop a Injun no other place, and, then. Well, he just plunked down and rolled. And we went up. And he wasn't big, he'd looked so grand, up there. All tore to pieces and little. Ever see a cock pheasant, stiff and beautiful, ever feather drawed and painted, and even his eyes drawed in pretty? And bang. You pick him up, bloody and twisted, and you spoiled somethin' better'n you, and eatin' him don't never make it up to you, 'cause you spoiled somethin' in yourself, and you can't never fix it up. And the people nodded, and perhaps the fire spurred it a little light and showed their eyes looking in on themselves. Against the sun, with his arms out. And he looked big, as God. And perhaps a man balanced 20 cents between food and pleasure, and he went to a movie in Marysville or Allaire, in Sears or Mountain View. And he came back to the ditch camp with his memory crowded. And he told how it was, they was this rich fella, and he makes like he's poor, and they's this rich girl, and she pretends like she's poor too, and they meet in a Hamburg stand. Why? I don't know why, that's how it was. Why'd they pretend like they's poor? Well, they're tired of bein' rich. Horse shit. You want to hear this, or not? Well, go on then. Sure. I want to hear it, but if I was rich, I'd get so many pork chops, I'd cord 'em up around me like wood, and I'd eat my way out. Go on. Well, they each think the other one's poor. And they get arrested and they get in jail, and they don't get out 'cause the other one find out the first one is rich. And the jail keeper, he's mean to 'em 'cause he thinks they're poor. Oughta see how he looks when he finds out. Just nearly faints, that's all. What they get in jail for? Well, they get caught at some kinda radical meetin', but they ain't radicals. They just happen to be there. And they don't each one want to marry for money, you see. So the sons of bitches start lyin' to each other right off. Well, in the picture it was like they was doin' good. They're nice to people, you see. I was to a show once that was me, more in me, my life, more in my life, so everything was bigger. Well, I get enough sorrow. I like to get away from it. Sure, if you can believe it. So they got married, and they found out, and all them people that's treated him mean. They was a fella had been uppity, and he nearly fainted when this fella come in with a plug hat on. Just nearly fainted. And they was a newsreel with them German soldiers kicking up their feet, funny as hell. And always, if he had a little money, a man could get drunk. The hard edges gone, and the warmth. Then there was no loneliness, for a man could people his brain with friends, and he could find his enemies and destroy them. Sitting in a ditch, the earth grew soft under him. Failure dulled and the future was no threat. And hunger did not skulk about, but the world was soft and easy, and a man could reach the place he started for. The stars came down wonderfully close and the sky was soft. Death was a friend, and sleep was death's brother. The old times came back, a girl with pretty feet, who danced one time at home, a horse, a long time ago. A horse and a saddle. And the leather was carved. When was that? Ought to find a girl to talk to. That's nice. Might lay with her, too. But warm here. And the stars down so close, and sadness and pleasure so close together, really the same thing. Like to stay drunk all the time. Who says it's bad? Who dares to say it's bad? Preachers, but they got their own kind of drunkenness. Thin, barren women, but they're too miserable to know. Reformers, but they don't hit deep enough into living to know. No, the stars are close and dear and I have joined the brotherhood of the worlds. And everything's holy, everything, even me. A harmonica is easy to carry. Take it out of your hip pocket, knock it against your palm to shake out the dirt and pocket fuzz and bits of tobacco. Now it's ready. You can do anything with a harmonica, thin reedy single tone, or chords, or melody with rhythm chords. You can mold the music with curved hands, making it wail and cry like bagpipes, making it full and round like an organ, making it as sharp and bitter as the reed pipes of the hills. And you can play and put it back in your pocket. It is always with you, always in your pocket. And as you play, you learn new tricks, new ways to mold the tone with your hands, to pinch the tone with your lips, and no one teaches you. You feel around, sometimes alone in the shade at noon, sometimes in the tent door after supper when the women are washing up. Your foot taps gently on the ground. Your eyebrows rise and fall in rhythm. And if you lose it or break it, why, it's no great loss. You can buy another for a quarter. A guitar is more precious. Must learn this thing. Fingers of the left hand must have callus caps. Thumb of the right hand a horn of callus. Stretch the left hand fingers, stretch them like a spider's legs to get the hard pads on the frets. This was my father's box. Wasn't no bigger 'n a bug first time he give me C chord. And when I learned as good as him, he hardly never played no more. Used to set in the door, unlisten and tap his foot. I'm tryin' for a break, and he'd scowl me until I get her, and then he'd settle back easy, and he'd nod. Play, he'd say. Play nice. It's a good box. See how the head is wore. They's many a million songs wore down that wood and scooped her out. Someday she'll cave in like a egg. But you can't patch her nor worry her no way or she'll lose tone. Play her in the evening, and they's a harmonica player in the next tent. Makes it pretty nice together. The fiddle is rare, hard to learn. No frets, no teacher. Just listen to a old man and try to pick it up. Won't tell how to double. Says it's a secret. But I watched. Here's how he done it. Shrill as a wind, the fiddle, quick and nervous and shrill. She ain't much of a fiddle. Give $2 for her. Fella says they's fiddles 400 years old, and they get mellow like whiskey. Says they'll cost $50,000–$60,000. I don't know. Sounds like a lie. Harsh old bastard, ain't she? Want to dance? I'll rub up the bow with plenty rosin. Man. Then she'll squawk. Hear her a mile. These three in the evening, harmonica and fiddle and guitar. Playing a reel and tapping out the tune, and the big deep strings of the guitar beating like a heart, and the harmonica's sharp chords and the skirl and squeal of the fiddle. People have to move close. They can't help it. Chicken reel now, and the feet tap and a young lean buck takes 3 quick steps, and his arms hang limp. The square closes up and the dancing starts, feet on the bare ground, beating dull, strike with your heels. Hands round and swing. Hair falls down, and panting breaths. Lean to the side now. Look at that Texas boy, long legs loose, taps 4 times for every damn step. Never seen a boy swing around like that. Look at him swing that Cherokee girl, red in her cheeks and her toe points out. Look at her pant, look at her heave. Think she's tired? Think she's winded? Well, she ain't. Texas boy got his hair in his eyes, mouth's wide open, can't get air, but he pats 4 times for every darn step, and he'll keep a-going with the Cherokee girl. The fiddle squeaks and the guitar bongs. Mouth organ man is red in the face. Texas boy and the Cherokee girl, pantin' like dogs and a beatin' the ground. Ol' folks stan' appetin' their hawns. Smilin' a little, tappin' their feet. Back home, in the schoolhouse, it was. The big moon sailed off to the westward. And we walked, him and me, a little ways. Didn't talk 'cause our throats was choked up. Didn't talk none at all. And purty soon they was a haycock. Went right to it and laid down there. Seen the Texas boy and that girl a-steppin' away into the dark, think nobody's seen 'em go. Oh, God. I wished I was a-goin' with that Texas boy. Moon'll be up 'fore long. I seen that girl's ol' man move out to stop 'em and then he did. He knowed. Might as well stop the fall from comin', and might as well stop the sap from movin' in the trees. And the moon'll be up 'fore long. Play more, play the story songs, as I walked through the streets of Laredo. The fire's gone down. Be ashamed to build her up. Little ol' moon'll be up 'fore long. Beside an irrigation ditch a preacher labored and the people cried. And the preacher paced like a tiger, whipping the people with his voice, and they groveled and whined on the ground. He calculated them, gauged them, played on them, and when they were all squirming on the ground he stooped down and of his great strength he picked each one up in his arms and shouted, "Take 'em, Christ!" and threw each one in the water. And when they were all in, waist deep in the water, and looking with frightened eyes at the master, he knelt down on the bank and he prayed for them, and he prayed that all men and women might grovel and whine on the ground. Men and women, dripping, clothes sticking tight, watched. Then gurgling and sloshing in their shoes they walked back to the camp, to the tents, and they talked softly in wonder. "We've been saved," they said. "We're washed white as snow. We won't never sin again." And the children, frightened and wet, whispered together, "We been saved. We won't sin no more. Wisht I knowed what all the sins was, so I could do 'em." The migrant people looked humbly for pleasure on the roads. 24. On Saturday morning the wash tubs were crowded. The women washed dresses, pink ginghams and flowered cottons, and they hung them in the sun and stretched the cloth to smooth it. When afternoon came the whole camp quickened and the people grew excited. The children caught the fever and were more noisy than usual. About mid-afternoon child bathing began, and as each child was caught, subdued, and washed, the noise on the playground gradually subsided. Before 5, the children were scrubbed and warned about getting dirty again, and they walked about, stiff in clean clothes, miserable with carefulness. At the big open-air dance platform a committee was busy. Every bit of electric wire had been requisitioned. The city dump had been visited for wire, every toolbox had contributed friction tape. And now the patched, spliced wire was strung out to the dance floor, with bottlenecks as insulators. This night the floor would be lighted for the first time. By 6 o'clock the men were back from work or from looking for work, and a new wave of bathing started. By 7, dinners were over, men had on their best clothes, freshly washed overalls, clean blue shirts, sometimes the decent blacks. The girls were ready in their print dresses, stretched and clean, their hair braided and ribboned. The worried women watched the families and cleaned up the evening dishes. On the platform the string band practiced, surrounded by a double wall of children. The people were intent and excited. In the tent of Ezra Houston, chairman, the Central Committee of 5 men went into meeting. Houston, a tall spare man, wind-blackened, with eyes like little blades, spoke to his committee, 1 man from each sanitary unit. "It's goddamn lucky we got the word they was gonna try to bust up the dance," he said. The tubby little representative from Unit 3 spoke up. "I think we ought to squash the hell out of 'em, and show 'em." "No," said Houston. "That's what they want." "No, sir. If they can get a fight going, then they can run in the cops and say we ain't orderly. They tried it before, other places." He turned to the sad dark boy from Unit 2. "Got the fellas together to go round the fences and see nobody sneaks in?" The sad boy nodded. "Yeah. 12. Tell 'em not to hit nobody. Just push 'em out again." Houston said, "Will you go out and find Willie Eaton? He's chairman of the entertainment, ain't he?" "Yeah." "Well, tell him we want to see him." The boy went out, and he returned in a moment with a stringy Texas man. Willie Eaton had a long fragile jaw and dust-colored hair. His arms and legs were long and loose, and he had the gray sunburned eyes of the panhandle. He stood in the tent, grinning, and his hands pivoted restlessly on his wrists. Houston said, "You heard about tonight?" Willie grinned. "Yeah. Did anything about it?" "Yeah. Tell what you done." Willie Eaton grinned happily. "Well, sir, ordinary entertainment committee is 5. I got 20 more, all good strong boys. They're gonna be a dancin' and a keepin' their eyes open and their ears open. First sign, any talk or argument, they close in tight. Worked her out pretty nice. Can't even see nothing. Kinda move out, the fella will go out with 'em. Tell 'em they ain't to hurt the fellas." Willie laughed gleefully. "I tell 'em," he said. "Well, tell 'em so they know." "They know." "Got 5 men out to the gate lookin' over the folks that comes in. Try to spot 'em 'fore they get started." Houston stood up. His steel-colored eyes were stern. "Now you look here, Willie. We don't want them fellas hurt. They's gonna be deputies out by the front gate. If you blood 'em up, why, them deputies'll get you." "Got that there figured out," said Willie. "Take 'em out the back way, into the field. Some of the boys'll see they get on their way." "Well, it sounds alright," Houston said worriedly. "But don't you let nothing happen, Willie. You're responsible. Don't you hurt them fellas. Don't you use no stick nor no knife or iron, or nothing like that." "No, sir," said Willie. "We won't mark 'em." Houston was suspicious. "I wished I knowed I could trust you, Willie. If you got to sock 'em where they won't bleed." "Yes, sir," said Willie. "You sure of the fellas you picked?" "Yes, sir." "Alright. And if she gets out of han, I'll be in the right-in corner, this way on the dance floor." Willie saluted in mockery and went out. Houston said, "I dunno. I just hope Willie's boys don't kill nobody. What the hell the deputies want to hurt the camp for? Why can't they let us be?" The sad boy from Unit 2 said, "I lived out at Sunland Land and Cattle Company's place. Honest to God, they got a cop for every 10 people. Got one water faucet for about 200 people." The tubby man said, "Jesus, God, Jeremy. You ain't got to tell me. I was there. They got a block of shacks, 35 of 'em in a row, 15 deep. And they got 10 crappers for the whole shebang. And, Christ, you could smell 'em a mile. One of them deputies give me the lowdown. We was settin' around, and he says, 'Them goddamn government camps,' he says. 'Give people hot water, and they gonna want hot water. Give 'em flush toilets, and they gonna want 'em.' He says, 'You give them goddamn Okais stuff like that and they'll want 'em.' And he says, they all read meetings in them government camps. All figurin' how to get on relief, he says." Houston asked. "Did nobody sock him?" "No. They was a little fella, and he says, 'What you mean, relief?' I mean relief, what us taxpayers puts in and you goddamn Okais takes out. We pay sales tax and gas tax and tobacco tax, this little guy says. And he say, farmers get 4 cents a cotton pound from the government, ain't that relief? And he says, railroads and shipping companies draw subsidies, ain't that relief? They're doing stuff got to be done, this deputy says. Well, the little guy says, how'd your goddamn crops get picked if it wasn't for us? The tubby man looked around. What did the deputy say? Houston asked. Well, the deputy got mad. And he says, you goddamn Reds is all the time stirring up trouble, he says. You better come along with me. So he takes this little guy in, and they give him 60 days in jail for vagrancy. How'd they do that if he had a job? Asked Timothy Wallace. The tubby man laughed. You know better than that, he said. You know a vagrant is anybody a cop don't like. And that's why they hate this here camp. No cops can get in. This here's United States, not California. Houston sighed. Wished we could stay here. Got to be going for long. I like this here. Folks gets along nice, and, God almighty, why can't they let us do it 'stead of keeping us miserable and putting us in jail? I swear to God they gonna push us into fighting if they don't quit they worrying us. Then he calmed his voice. We just got to keep peaceful, he reminded himself. The committee got no right to fly off in the handle. The tubby man from Unit 3 said, anybody that thinks this committee got all cheese and crackers ought to just try her. There was a fight in my unit today, women. Got to call in names, and then got to throw in garbage. Ladies committee couldn't handle it, and they come to me. Want me to bring the fight in this here committee. I tell 'em they got to handle women trouble theirselves. This here committee ain't gonna mess with no garbage fights. Houston nodded. You done good, he said. And now the dusk was falling, and as the darkness deepened the practicing of the string band seemed to grow louder. The lights flashed on and 2 men inspected the patched wire to the dance floor. The children crowded thickly about the musicians. A boy with a guitar sang the down-home blues, chording delicately for himself, and on his second chorus 3 harmonicas and a fiddle joined him. From the tents the people streamed toward the platform, men in their clean blue denim and women in their ginghams. They came near to the platform and then stood quietly waiting, their faces bright and intent under the light. Around the reservation there was a high wire fence, and along the fence, at intervals of 50 feet, the guards sat in the grass and waited. Now the cars of the guests began to arrive, small farmers and their families, migrants from other camps. And as each guest came through the gate he mentioned the name of the camper who had invited him. The string band took a real tune up and played loudly, for they were not practicing anymore. In front of their tents the Jesus lovers sat and watched, their faces hard and contemptuous. They did not speak to one another, they watched for sin, and their faces condemned the whole proceeding. At the Jode tent Ruthie and Winfield had bolted what little dinner they had, and then they started for the platform. Ma called them back, held up their faces with a hand under each chin, and looked into their nostrils, pulled their ears and looked inside, and sent them to the sanitary unit to wash their hands once more. They dodged around the back of the building and bolted for the platform, to stand among the children, close packed about the band. Al finished his dinner and spent half an hour shaving with Tom's razor. Al had a tight-fitting wool suit and a striped shirt, and he bathed and washed and combed his straight hair back. And when the washroom was vacant for a moment, he smiled engagingly at himself in the mirror, and he turned and tried to see himself in profile when he smiled. He slipped his purple armbands on and put on his tight coat. And he rubbed up his yellow shoes with a piece of toilet paper. A late bather came in, and Al hurried out and walked recklessly toward the platform, his eye peeled for girls. Near the dance floor he saw a pretty blonde girl sitting in front of a tent. He sidled near and threw open his coat to show his shirt. "Gonna dance tonight?" he asked. The girl looked away and did not answer. "Can't a fella pass a word with you? How about you and me dancin'?" And he said nonchalantly, "I can waltz." The girl raised her eyes shyly, and she said, "That ain't nothin', anybody can waltz." "Not like me," said Al. The music surged, and he tapped one foot in time. Come on, he said. A very fat woman poked her head out of the tent and scowled at him. You get along, she said fiercely. This here girl's spoke for. She's gonna be married, and her man's comin' for her. Al winked rakishly at the girl, and he tripped on, striking his feet to the music and swaying his shoulders and swinging his arms. And the girl looked after him intently. Pa put down his plate and stood up. Come on, John, he said, and he explained to Ma, we're gonna talk to some fellas about gettin' work. And Pa and Uncle John walked toward the manager's house. Tom worked a piece of store bread into the stew gravy on his plate and ate the bread. He handed his plate to Ma, and she put it in the bucket of hot water and washed it, and handed it to Rose of Sharon to wipe. Ain't you going to the dance? Ma asked. Sure, said Tom. I'm on a committee. We're gonna entertain some fellas. Already on a committee? Ma said. I guess it's 'cause you got work. Rose of Sharon turned to put the dish away. Tom pointed at her. My God, she's getting big, he said. Rose of Sharon blushed and took another dish from Ma. Sure she is, Ma said. And she's getting prettier, said Tom. The girl blushed more deeply and hung her head. You stop it, she said softly. Course she is, said Ma. Girl with a baby always gets prettier. Tom laughed. If she keeps swellin' like this, she gonna need a wheelbarrow to carry it. Now you stop, Rose of Sharon said, and she went inside the tent, out of sight. Ma chuckled, you should not to worry her. She likes it, said Tom. I know she likes it, but it worries her, too. And she's mournin' for Connie. Well, she might's well give him up. He's probably studyin' to be President of the United States by now. Don't worry her, Ma said. She ain't got no easy road to hoe. Willie Eaton moved near, and he grinned and said, You Tom Joad? Yeah. Well, I'm chairman the entertainment committee. We gonna need you. Fella told me about you. Sure, I'll play with you, said Tom. This here's Ma. Howdy, said Willie. Glad to meet ya. Willie said, gonna put you on the gate to start, and then on the floor. Want ya to look over the guys when they come in, and try to spot 'em. You'll be with another fella. Then later I want ya to dance and watch. Yeah. I can do that alright, said Tom. Ma said apprehensively, they ain't no trouble? No, ma'am, Willie said. They ain't gonna be no trouble. None at all, said Tom. Well, I'll come along. See you at the dance, Ma. The two young men walked quickly away toward the main gate. Ma piled the washed dishes on a box. Come on out, she called, and when there was no answer, Rosa Sharn, you come out. The girl stepped from the tent, and she went on with the dish wiping. Tom was jolly in ya. I know. I didn't mind, I hate to have folks look at me. Ain't no way to help that. Folks gonna look. But it makes folks happy to see a girl in a family way, makes folks sort of giggly and happy. Ain't you goin' to the dance? I was, but I don't know. I wished Connie was here. Her voice rose. Ma, I wished he was here. I can't hardly stand it. Ma looked closely at her. I know, she said. But, Rosa Sharn, don't shame your folks. I don't aim to, Ma. Well, don't you shame us. We got too much on us now, without no shame. The girl's lip quivered. I ain't going to the dance. I couldn't, Ma, help me. She sat down and buried her head in her hands. Ma wiped her hands on the dish towel and she squatted down in front of her daughter, and she put her two hands on Rose of Sharon's hair. You're a good girl, she said. You always was a good girl. I'll take care of you. Don't you fret. She put an interest in her tone. Know what you and me's gonna do? We're going to that dance, and we're gonna sit there and watch. If anybody says to come dance, why, I'll say you ain't strong enough. I'll say you're poorly. And you can hear the music and all like that. Rose of Sharon raised her head. You won't let me dance? No, I won't. And don't let nobody touch me. No, I won't. The girl sighed. She said desperately, I don't know what I'm gonna do, Ma. I don't know. I don't know. Ma patted her knee. Look, she said. Look here at me. I'm gonna tell ya. In a little while it ain't gonna be so bad. In a little while. And that's true. Now come on. We'll go get washed up, and we'll put on our nice dress and we'll set by the dance. She led Rose of Sharon toward the sanitary unit. Pa and Uncle John squatted with a group of men by the porch of the office. We nearly got work today, Pa said. We was due a few minutes late. They already got 2 fellas. And, well, sir, it was a funny thing. They's a straw boss there, and he says, we do got some 2-bit men. Course we could use 20-cent men. We can use a lot of 20-cent men. You go to your camp and say we'll put a lot of fellas on for 20 cents. The squatting men moved nervously. A broad-shouldered man, his face completely in the shadow of a black hat, spatted his knee with his palm. I know it, goddamn it! He cried. And they'll get men. They'll get hungry men. You can't feed your family on 20 cents an hour, but you'll take anything. They got you going and coming. They'd auction a job off. Jesus Christ, pretty soon they're gonna make us pay to work. We would have took her, Pa said. We ain't had no job. We sure would have took her, but they was them guys in there, and the way they looked, we was scared to take her. Black Hat said, get crazy thinkin'. I been workin' for a fella, and he can't pick his crop. Cost more just to pick her than he can get for her, and he don't know what to do. Seems to me, Pa stopped. The circle was silent for him. Well, I do thought, if a fella had an acre. Well, my woman she could raise a little truck and a couple pigs and some chickens. And us men could get out and find work, and then go back. Kids could maybe go to school. Never seen 6 schools as out here. Our kids ain't happy in them schools, Black Hat said. Why not? They're pretty nice, them schools. Well, a raggedy kid with no shoes, and them other kids with socks on, and nice pants, and them a yellin' okey. My boy went to school. Had a fight every day. Done good, too. Tough little bastard. Every day he got to fight. Come home with his clothes torn and his nose bloody. And his ma'd wail him. Made her stop that. No need everybody beatin' the hell out of him, poor little fella. Jesus. He gives some of them kids a goin' over, though, them nice pants sons of bitches. I dunno. I dunno. Pa demanded, well, what the hell am I gonna do? We're out of money. One of my boys got a shore job, but that won't feed us. I'm gonna go and take 20 cents. I got to. Black Hat raised his head, and his bristled chin showed in the light, and his stringy neck where the whiskers lay flat like fur. Yeah. He said bitterly. You'll do that. And I'm a 2-bit man. You'll take my job for 20 cents. And then I'll get hungry and I'll take my job back for 15. Yeah. You go right on and do her. Well, what the hell can I do? Pa demanded. I can't starve so's you can get 2 bits. Black Hat dipped his head again, and his chin went into the shadow. I dunno, he said. I just dunno. It's bad enough to work 12 hours a day and come out just a little bit hungry, but we got to figure all the time, too. My kid ain't getting enough to eat. I can't think all the time, goddamn it. It drives a man crazy. The circle of men shifted their feet nervously. Tom stood at the gate and watched the people coming into the dance. A floodlight shone down into their faces. Willie Eaton said, just keep your eyes open. I'm sending Jewel Vitla over. He's half Cherokee. Nice fella. Keep your eyes open. And see if you can pick out the ones. Okay, said Tom. He watched the farm families come in, the girls with braided hair and the boys polished for the dance. Jewel came and stood beside him. I'm with you, he said. Tom looked at the hawk nose and the high brown cheekbones and the slender receding chin. They says you're half Injun. You look all Injun to me. No, said Jewel. Just half. Wished I was a full blood. I'd have my land on the reservation. Them full bloods got it pretty nice, some of 'em. Look them people, Tom said. The guests were moving in through the gateway, families from the farms, migrants from the ditch camps. Children straining to be free and quiet parents holding them back. Jewel said, "These here dances done funny things. Our people got nothing, but just because they can ask their friends to come here to the dance, sets 'em up and makes 'em proud. And the folks respects 'em count of these here dances. Fella got a little place where I was a-workin'. He come to a dance here. I asked him myself, and he come. Says we got the only decent dance in the county, where a man can take his girls and his wife. Hey! Look!" 3 young men were coming through the gate, young working men in jeans. They walked close together. The guard at the gate questioned them, and they answered and passed through. "Look at 'em careful," Jewel said. He moved to the guard. "Who asked them 3?" he asked. "Fella named Jackson, Unit 4. Jewel came back to Tom. "I think them's our fellas." "How you know?" "I dunno how. Just got a feelin'. They're kinda scared. Foller 'em and tell Willie to look 'em over, and tell Willie to check with Jackson, Unit 4. Get him to see if they're all right. I'll stay here." Tom strolled after the 3 young men. They moved toward the dance floor and took their positions quietly on the edge of the crowd. Tom saw Willie near the band and signaled him. "What cha want?" Willie asked. "Them 3, see, there? Yeah. They say a fella named Jackson, Unit 4, asked 'em." Willie craned his neck and saw Houston and called him over. "Them 3 fellas," he said. "We better get Jackson, Unit 4, and see if he asked 'em." Houston turned on his heel and walked away, and in a few moments he was back with a lean and bony Kansan. "This here's Jackson," Houston said. "Look, Jackson, see them 3 young fellas?" "Yeah." "Well, did you ask 'em?" "No. Ever see 'em before?" Jackson peered at them. "Sure. Worked at Gregorio's with 'em. So they knowed your name?" "Sure. I worked right beside 'em." "Orright," Houston said. "Don't you go near 'em. We ain't gonna throw 'em out if they're nice." "Thanks, Mr. Jackson." "Good work," he said to Tom. "I guess them's the fellas." "Jewel picked 'em out," said Tom. "Hell, no wonder," said Willie. "His Injun blood smelled 'em. Well, I'll point 'em out to the boys." A 16-year-old boy came running through the crowd. He stopped, panting, in front of Houston. "Mr. Houston," he said. "I been like you said. They's a car with 6 men parked down by the eucalyptus trees, and they's one with 4 men up that north side road. I asked 'em for a match. They got guns. I seen 'em." Houston's eyes grew hard and cruel. "Willie," he said, "you sure you got everything ready?" Willie grinned happily. "Sure. Have, Mr. Houston. Ain't gonna be no trouble." "Well, don't hurt 'em. 'Member now. If you kin, quiet and nice, I kinda like to see 'em. Be in my tent." "I'll see what we can do," said Willie. Dancing had not formally started, but now Willie climbed onto the platform. "Choose up your squares," he called. The music stopped. Boys and girls, young men and women, ran about until 8 squares were ready on the big floor, ready and waiting. The girls held their hands in front of them and squirmed their fingers. The boys tapped their feet restlessly. Around the floor the old folks sat, smiling slightly, holding the children back from the floor. And in the distance the Jesus lovers sat with hard condemning faces and watched the sin. Ma and Rose of Sharon sat on a bench and watched. And as each boy asked Rose of Sharon as partner, Ma said, "No, she ain't well." And Rose of Sharon blushed and her eyes were bright. The caller stepped to the middle of the floor and held up his hands. "All ready? Then let her go." The music snarled out chicken reel, shrill and clear, fiddle skirling, harmonicas nasal and sharp, and the guitars booming on the bass strings. The caller named the turns, the squares moved. And they danced forward and back, hands round, swing your lady. The caller, in a frenzy, tapped his feet, strutted back and forth, went through the figures as he called them. "Swing your ladies in a doll's do. Join hands round and away we go." The music rose and fell, and the moving shoes beating in time on the platform sounded like drums. Swing to the right and a swing to left, break, now, break, back to, back, the caller sang the high vibrant monotone. Now the girl's hair lost the careful combing. Now perspiration stood out on the foreheads of the boys. Now the experts showed the tricky intersteps. And the old people on the edge of the floor took up the rhythm, patted their hands softly, and tapped their feet, and they smiled gently and then caught one another's eyes and nodded. Ma leaned her head close to Rose of Sharon's ear. Maybe you wouldn't think it, but your pa was as nice a dancer as I ever seen, when he was young. And Ma smiled. Makes me think of old times, she said. And on the faces of the watchers the smiles were of old times. Up near Muskogee 20 years ago, they was a bling man with a fiddle. I seen a fella once could slap his heels 4 times in one jump. Swedes up in Dakota, know what they do sometimes? Put pepper on the floor. Gets up the ladies' skirts and makes 'em pretty lively as a filly in season. Swedes do that sometimes. In the distance the Jesus lovers watched their restive children. Look on sin, they said. Them folks is right into hell on a poker. It's a shame the godly got to see it. And their children were silent and nervous. One more round and then a little rees, the caller chanted. Hit her hard, 'cause we're gonna stop soon. And the girls were damp and flushed, and they danced with open mouths and serious reverent faces, and the boys flung back their long hair and pranced, pointed their toes, and clicked their heels. In and out the squares moved, crossing, backing, whirling, and the music shrilled. Then suddenly it stopped. The dancers stood still, panting with fatigue. And the children broke from restraint, dashed on the floor, chased one another madly, ran, slid, stole caps, and pulled hair. The dancers sat down, fanning themselves with their hands. The members of the band got up and stretched themselves and sat down again. And the guitar players worked softly over their strings. Now Willie called, choose again for another square, if you can. The dancers scrambled to their feet and new dancers plunged forward for partners. Tom stood near the 3 young men. He saw them force their way through, out on the floor, toward one of the forming squares. He waved his hand at Willie, and Willie spoke to the fiddler. The fiddler squawked his bow across the strings. 20 young men lounged slowly across the floor. The 3 reached the square. And one of them said, I'll dance with this here. A blond boy looked up in astonishment. She's my partner. Listen, you little son of a bitch. Off in the darkness a shrill whistle sounded. The 3 were walled in now. And each one felt the grip of hands. And then the wall of men moved slowly off the platform. Willie yelped, let's go. The music shrilled out, the caller intoned the figures, the feet thudded on the platform. A touring car drove to the entrance. The driver called, open up. We hear you got a riot. The guard kept his position. We got no riot. Listen to that music. Who are you? Deputy sheriffs. Got a warrant? We don't need a warrant if there's a riot. Well, we got no riots here, said the gate guard. The men in the car listened to the music and the sound of the caller, and then the car pulled away and parked in a crossroad and waited. In the moving squad each of the 3 young men was pinioned, and a hand was over each mouth. When they reached the darkness the group opened up. Tom said, that sure was did nice. He held both arms of his victim from behind. Willie ran over to them from the dance floor. Nice work, he said. Ani needs 6 now. Houston wants to see these here fellers. Houston himself emerged from the darkness. These the ones? Sure, said Jewel. Went right up and started it. But they didn't even swing once. Let's look at 'em. The prisoners were swung around to face them. Their heads were down. Houston put a flashlight beam in each sullen face. What did you want to do it for? He asked. There was no answer. Who the hell told you to do it? God darn it, we didn't do nothing. We was just gonna dance. No, you wasn't, Jewel said. You was gonna sock that kid. Tom said, Mr. Houston, Jew, when these here fellas moved in, somebody give a whistle. Yeah, I know. The cops come right to the gate. He turned back. We ain't gonna hurt you. Now who told you to come bus up our dance? He waited for a reply. You're our own folks, Houston said sadly. You belong with us. How'd you happen to come? We know all about it, he added. Well, goddamn it, a fella got to eat. Well, who sent you? Who paid you to come? We ain't been paid. And you ain't gonna be. No fight, no pay. Ain't that right? One of the Pinion men said, do what you want. We ain't gonna tell nothing. Houston's head sank down for a moment, and then he said softly, okay, don't tell. But looka here. Don't knife your own folks. We're trying to get along, having fun and keep in order. Don't tear all that down. Just think about it. You're just harming yourself. Alright, boys, put 'em over the back fence. Don't hurt 'em. They don't know what they're doing. The squad moved slowly toward the rear of the camp, and Houston looked after them. Jewel said, let's just take one good kick at 'em. No, you don't. Willie cried. I said we would. Just one nice little kick, Jewel pleaded. Just loft 'em over the fence. No, sir, Willie insisted. Listen you, he said, we're letting you off this time. But you take back the word. If and ever this here happens again, we'll just naturally kick the hell out of whoever comes, we'll bust every bone in their body. Now you tell your boys that. Houston says you're our kind of folks, maybe. I'd hate to think of it. They neared the fence. Two of the seated guards stood up and moved over. Got some fellas going home early, said Willie. The three men climbed over the fence and disappeared into the darkness. And the squad moved quickly back toward the dance floor. And the music of old Dan Tucker skirled and whined from the string band. Over near the office the men still squatted and talked, and the shrill music came to them. Pa said, they's change a comin'. I don't know what. Maybe we won't live to see her, but she's a comin'. They's a restless feelin'. Fella can't figure nothing out, he's so nervous. And Black Hat lifted his head up again, and the light fell on his bristly whiskers. He gathered some little rocks from the ground and shot them like marbles, with his thumb. I don't know. She's a comin' alright, like you say. Fella told me what happened in Akron, Ohio. Rubber companies. They got mountain people in 'cause they'd work cheap. These here mountain people up and joined the union. Well, sir, hell just popped. All them storekeepers and legioners and people like that, they get drillin' and yellin', red. And they gonna run the union right outta Akron. Preachers get a preachin' about it, and papers a yellin', and they's pick handles put out by the rubber companies, and they're a buyin' gas. Jesus, you'd think them mountain boys was regular devils. He stopped and found some more rocks to shoot. Well, sir, it was last March, on one Sunday 5,000 of them mountain men had a turkey shoot outside a town. 5,000 of 'em just marched through town with their rifles. And they had their turkey shoot, and then they marched back. And that's all they done. Well, sir, they ain't been no trouble since then. These here citizens committees give back the pick handles, and the storekeepers keep their stores, and nobody been clubbed nor tarred and feathered and nobody been killed. There was a long silence, and then Black Hat said, they're gettin' purty mean out here. Burn that camp and beat up folks. I've been thinkin'. All our folks got guns. I've been thinkin' maybe we ought to get up a turkey shootin' club and have meetin's every Sunday. The men looked up at him, and then down at the ground, and their feet moved restlessly and they shifted their weight from one leg to the other. 25. The spring is beautiful in California. Valleys in which the fruit blossoms are fragrant pink and white waters in a shallow sea. Then the first tendrils of the grapes swelling from the old gnarled vines, cascade down to cover the trunks. The full green hills are round and soft as breasts. And on the level vegetable lands are the mile-long rows of pale green lettuce and the spindly little cauliflowers, the gray-green unearthly artichoke plants. And then the leaves break out on the trees, and the petals drop from the fruit trees and carpet the earth with pink and white. The centers of the blossoms swell and grow in color, cherries and apples, peaches and pears, figs which close the flower in the fruit. All California quickens with produce, and the fruit grows heavy, and the limbs bend gradually under the fruit so that little crotches must be placed under them to support the weight. Behind the fruitfulness are men of understanding and knowledge, and skill, men who experiment with seed, endlessly developing the techniques for greater crops of plants whose roots will resist the million enemies of the earth, the molds, the insects, the rusts, the blights. These men work carefully and endlessly to perfect the seed, the roots. And there are the men of chemistry who spray the trees against pests, who sulfur the grapes, who cut out disease and rots, mildews and sicknesses. Doctors of preventive medicine, men at the borders who look for fruit flies, for Japanese beetle, men who quarantine the sick trees and root them out and burn them, men of knowledge. The men who graft the young trees, the little vines, are the cleverest of all, for theirs is a surgeon's job, as tender and delicate, and these men must have surgeons' hands and surgeons' hearts to slit the bark, to place the grafts, to bind the wounds and cover them from the air. These are great men. Along the rows, the cultivators move, tearing the spring grass and turning it under to make a fertile earth, breaking the ground to hold the water up near the surface, ridging the ground in little pools for the irrigation, destroying the weed roots that may drink the water away from the trees. And all the time the fruit swells and the flowers break out in long clusters on the vines. And in the growing year the warmth grows and the leaves turn dark green. The prunes lengthen like little green birds' eggs, and the limbs sag down against the crutches under the weight. And the hard little pears take shape, and the beginning of the fuzz comes out on the peaches. Grape blossoms shed their tiny petals and the hard little beads become green buttons, and the buttons grow heavy. The men who work in the fields, the owners of the little orchards, watch and calculate. The year is heavy with produce. And the men are proud, for of their knowledge they can make the year heavy. They have transformed the world with their knowledge. The short, lean wheat has been made big and productive. Little sour apples have grown large and sweet, and that old grape that grew among the trees and fed the birds its tiny fruit has mothered 1,000 varieties, red and black, green and pale pink, purple and yellow, and each variety with its own flavor. The men who work in the experimental farms have made new fruits, nectarines and 40 kinds of plums, walnuts with paper shells. And always they work, selecting, grafting, changing, driving themselves, driving the earth to produce. And first the cherries ripen. $1.50 a pound. Hell, we can't pick 'em for that. Black cherries and red cherries, full and sweet, and the birds eat half of each cherry and the yellow jackets buzz into the holes the birds made. And on the ground the seeds drop and dry with black shreds hanging from them. The purple prunes soften and sweeten. My God, we can't pick them and dry and sulfur them. We can't pay wages, no matter what wages. And the purple prunes carpet the ground. And first the skins wrinkle a little and swarms of flies come to feast, and the valley is filled with the odor of sweet decay. The meat turns dark and the crop shrivels on the ground. And the pears grow yellow and soft. $5 a ton. $5 for 40-50-pound boxes, trees pruned and sprayed, orchards cultivated, pick the fruit, put it in boxes, load the trucks, deliver the fruit to the cannery, 40 boxes for $5. We can't do it. And the yellow fruit falls heavily to the ground and splashes on the ground. The yellow jackets dig into the soft meat, and there is a smell of ferment and rot. Then the grapes, we can't make good wine. People can't buy good wine. Rip the grapes from the vines, good grapes, rotten grapes, wasp-stung grapes. Press stems, press dirt and rot. But there's mildew and formic acid in the vats. Add sulfur and tannic acid. The smell from the ferment is not the rich odor of wine, but the smell of decay and chemicals. Oh, well. It has alcohol in it, anyway. They can get drunk. The little farmers watched debt creep up on them like the tide. They sprayed the trees and sold no crop, they pruned and grafted and could not pick the crop. And the men of knowledge have worked, have considered, and the fruit is rotting on the ground, And the decaying mash in the wine vat is poisoning the air. And taste the wine, no grape flavor at all, just sulfur and tannic acid and alcohol. This little orchard will be a part of a great holding next year, for the debt will have choked the owner. This vineyard will belong to the bank. Only the great owners can survive, for they own the canneries, too. And 4 pears peeled and cut in half, cooked and canned, still cost 15 cents. And the canned pears do not spoil. They will last for years. The decay spreads over the state, and the sweet smell is a great sorrow on the land. Men who can graft the trees and make the seed fertile and big can find no way to let the hungry people eat their produce. Men who have created new fruits in the world cannot create a system whereby their fruits may be eaten. And the failure hangs over the state like a great sorrow. The works of the roots of the vines, of the trees, must be destroyed to keep up the price, and this is the saddest, bitterest thing of all. Carloads of oranges dumped on the ground. The people came for miles to take the fruit, but this could not be. How would they buy oranges at 20 cents a dozen if they could drive out and pick them up? And men with hoses squirt kerosene on the oranges, and they are angry at the crime, angry at the people who have come to take the fruit. A million people hungry, needing the fruit, and kerosene sprayed over the golden mountains. And the smell of rot fills the country. Burn coffee for fuel in the ships. Burn corn to keep warm, it makes a hot fire. Dump potatoes in the rivers and place guards along the banks to keep the hungry people from fishing them out. Slaughter the pigs and bury them, and let the putrescence drip down into the earth. There is a crime here that goes beyond denunciation. There is a sorrow here that weeping cannot symbolize. There is a failure here that topples all our success. The fertile earth, the straight tree rows, the sturdy trunks, and the ripe fruit. And children dying of pellagra must die because a profit cannot be taken from an orange. And coroners must fill in the certificate, died of malnutrition, because the food must rot, must be forced to rot. The people come with nets to fish for potatoes in the river, and the guards hold them back. They come in rattling cars to get the dumped oranges, but the kerosene is sprayed. And they stand still and watch the potatoes float by, listen to the screaming pigs being killed in a ditch and covered with quicklime, watch the mountains of oranges slop down to a putrefying ooze, and in the eyes of the people there is the failure, and in the eyes of the hungry there is a growing wrath. In the souls of the people the grapes of wrath are filling and growing heavy for the vintage.